everyone, this is Warren with KLGadgetTV, and what I have right here today in the studio is the OPPO A91. Now the A91 is a pretty interesting device right here because it only costs 999 ringgit and it offers a lot of features under the hood that you wouldn't expect out of a mid-range smartphone as of today. Now for instance, the OPPO A91 has a 48 megapixel quad camera system and it has in-display fingerprint reader 3.0 as mentioned on the back right here. So I'm going to assume that it is going to be much faster and more accurate than the previous generation or any other smartphones out there. But the most interesting part is that for under 1,000 ringgit, you are getting OPPO's proprietary VOOC flash charge technology to charge up its 4025 mAh battery. So this thing is going to charge up in no time if it runs low on battery. Now, specs wise, this thing runs on a MediaTek Helio P70 processor. It has 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, which is actually kind of pretty standard these days for mid-range phones. So yep, this is the OPPO A91. It has a pretty nice and interesting packaging, no longer the boring kind of smartphone packaging that OPPO used to have right there. Let's unbox and find out what's inside, and I'm going to give you my first impressions about it. Alright folks, let's just quickly unbox the OPPO A91, and I've already ripped off the plastic wrapping, so we are good to go by just opening the box like this. Let's expect a thumb. There you go, a good thumb anyway. So on the first box, we actually see the TPU case, the SIM ejector, and some paperwork right underneath here. Let's put that aside, and we have the OPPO A91, which is our star of this video. So as usual, you do actually see this 4 USBs on this protector here. So the VOOC flash charge actually has 20 watts of charging speed that OPPO claims that you can charge up to 50% of power in a mere 30 minutes. Now let's put the phone aside and check out other accessories down underneath here. Now we have the VOOC flash charger right under here, and interestingly this thing has a maximum power of up to, yeah, it's 20 watts anyway. I thought it was like 5 volts and 20 amperes. That couldn't be. Yeah, this is a pretty small brick. It's not as heavy as the Super VOOC flash charger that we have seen previously. And you get the charging cable. This is a Type-C. Finally, OPPO doesn't ship any micro USB cables or micro USB port phones this time in 2020. Alright, let's put that aside. And finally, we have the headphones. Well, it's kind of rare for smartphone companies to include headphones these days, but OPPO still includes one, and that's actually a good news. And now, this is the OPPO A91. Now, the color that we have got here is called the lightning black color, and actually I find something funny. Alright, let's take a look back at the box again. So on the box here, it actually says that the color is called lightning black. I have no idea what kind of English is that. I mean, not to say that my English is really good too, but then, you know, this is actually a pretty funny color name. So I'll just simply call this the lightning black color, even though there's no lightning around. But look at this reflection on the plastic. This is definitely a plastic material, doesn't feel like glass, but look at the reflection. It actually looks pretty nice once it gets exposed to light. Okay, let's take a look at the hardware tour. So on the left here, you get your volume rocker. The SIM and micro SD card tray is right up here, and on the bottom you get the Type-C connector, and you still get a 3.5mm headphone jack. On the right here you get your standard power button, and this is a nice 6.4-inch Super AMOLED Full HD Plus display that looks really nice here, even though I haven't got the phone set up yet, but I expect to be really nice since it's a Super AMOLED panel. Alright, so on the back here you got your quad camera system, and man, look at this design. It looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? It looks like a Realme phone, I guess, since they pretty much came out from the same factory, but it's just that here you get the OPPO sign. Definitely looks like a, you know, like a digital camera design here. So you get a 48 megapixel main lens that is at f1.8. You get a 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and you get a 2 megapixel portrait and 2 megapixel mono lens. Now, one thing that's interesting is that OPPO has decided to put a 2 megapixel mono instead of a macro lens that most people do. So I'm going to expect some great dynamic range on this phone's camera since it combines with the mono lens. So let's just try to take some camera shots after that, and I'll tell you my thoughts about it. And you get a camera flash right here. It's a dual flash, and it looks pretty nice. Okay, so let's take a look around the phone itself. I'm going to set up and show you around the software. Alright, and here we are at the home screen of the OPPO A91. Unfortunately, this phone doesn't ship with Android 10 out of the box, which I really wish OPPO will issue that update really soon if you guys plan to own this phone, because it really feels nice to use. The Helio P70 processor is doing its job in making this interface really smooth, and you get 8GB of RAM. So this is going to be a really future-proof mid-range smartphone. Right, one of my favorite features of ColorOS 6 is definitely this one. It sounds pretty ironic because ColorOS 6 only includes the app drawer as of now, because this is something that I've been wanting on most Chinese smartphones, and they finally include it here to make app organization really, really better. Alright, so we're going to tap into the camera app. So as you can see, the most of the camera are pretty simple, but in fact you can find other camera modes by just tapping on this option menu here, which you get to have night mode, panorama, and expert, time-lapse, slow-mo, sticker, and Google Lens. Now let's head on over to the expert mode. So in the expert mode, you can actually configure your ISO and your shutter speed, and it's kind of funny because they actually named this exposure, which in fact it should be this EV exposure value. I'm not sure why they actually called this ISO and shutter speed configuration exposure, but you do also get white balance and autofocus, which is actually pretty cool. All right, let's exit the expert mode, and you of course you get this 1x, and when you tap in 2 times, 5 times, and back to 1 times. Now this is a bit funny because I mean in terms of user interface perspective, because you know there's no way that you can simply just use the ultra wide angle camera by just pinching out of the screen, because that doesn't work. But it can only be activated when you tap on this button on the top, where when you press on it, it will only show ultra wide angle and macro mode, which is actually kind of funny. And what's even more funny is that this doesn't have a macro lens, but it kind of enables macro mode when you tap on the ultra wide angle lens. So this actually tells us that OPPO is actually using the ultra wide angle camera of the phone to do macro shots, which is kind of pretty weird, to be honest. Alright, so you do actually get other modes up here. You get the dazzle color, which is kind of like a vivid mode that oversaturates your photos. And let's go on to the settings and find out some of the stuff. Alright, so you do also find out that there's no simple way of activating the 48 megapixel resolution if you want to on the viewfinder. Alright, so video, we have up to 1080p at 30 frames per second. You can configure any other frame rates if you want to. And this is where you get to activate your 48 megapixel shooting mode. Once you tap on this one and go back to the camera viewfinder, and you will see a 48 megapixel label right on top over here. Now this is definitely not the most straightforward camera app right here, but considering it is a mid-range phone, we just gotta expect some compromises to the camera software. Now I spent about 30 minutes on the OPPO A91, and I have to say, as a mid-range device, the A91 definitely impresses in some ways. Now the first thing that I would like to highlight is the fingerprint reader. Now as you can see, there is actually a fingerprint reader icon right at the bottom of the screen. I just find this position a little bit not so ergonomic, because as I hold the phone like this, if I were to reach my thumb down to the fingerprint reader, it's going to be a little bit cumbersome, and I just find it to be better if the fingerprint reader position is moved up to the top right here, just like how you find on Samsung phones. That's actually a better position right there. But otherwise, this fingerprint reader works great as a mid-range phone. Let me show you that. Now, I have my phone here, and I'm just going to touch right here. And look at this. This is the problem. So let me just turn on the phone screen, and as I tap on it, boom, unlocks within a second, and that's actually pretty fast. Let's do that again. Now turn off, and there's the fingerprint reader icon. Boom. There we go, within a second. That's actually a really, really fast in-screen fingerprint reader, just like what OPPO claims on its website. It's really, really fast. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is cameras. Now, the 48 megapixel camera is supported by that 2 megapixel mono lens down here when taking pictures, and I have to say that the dynamic range is great for a mid-range phone. You rarely see such kind of dynamic range for its wide angle lens, and even when it comes to its ultra wide angle lens, it actually looks pretty decent. Now, when I mentioned earlier on my hands-on that it feels kind of weird that OPPO uses the ultra wide angle camera to do macro shots, and you know what? In fact, it does work. Take a look at this picture. I actually shot the NFC icon of my Sony A6500 camera, and it actually looks pretty clear. It's not something that's entirely usable, to be honest, but I would say that it's definitely good enough. Alright, so yeah, this is a pretty good smartphone. It has a large battery, great performance, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigabytes of storage, something that mid-range phone hunters will definitely like. Go check it out at OPPO online stores, and if once the restriction movement order is over, go check it out at your stores if you want to have a hands-on. But you know what? If you have any questions about the OPPO A91, leave comments down below and I will try to answer them as quickly as possible. And you know what? Check out in the link below to know more about the OPPO A91. That's pretty much for today's video on KL Gadget TV. Subscribe to us if you want to see more tech videos from us, and follow us on the usual social media channels. Once again, I'm Warren with KL Gadget TV, and I will see you in the next video.